Are you ready for the weekend yet? We have events, news, and a guest for you to enjoy this Lake Life weekend. Hey there, this is Dirk, your host for this weekend's Lake Life Weekend podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we are approaching spring. Evidently, it's getting warmer and nicer, and we celebrate maple syrup days this weekend. So get out and explore and find out how to make it and how it tastes. So in Verges, we have a day filled of maple syrup contesting, pancake feed. Come there at 7:30 through 11:30 and get fed and try out the local producers of maple syrup, and I believe you can enter your vote for the best of 2019. There's also some live entertainment on stage, so Verges is active this weekend. And when you're not done yet, go to Maplewood State Park afterwards to the Sugar Shack. There is a day of demonstration how to actually use the sap, boil it down, and then get maple syrup. So educational, a good family trip. You can take a hike through the park, explore the trails and all that also. So many things to do. We are excited for the weather to hopefully play along and visit Lakes Country this weekend, have fun. And for more adventures to explore and news, please also go to our website, lakelifeweekend.com. We update that daily and hope you find something fun. Let us know what you think. Let us know what is missing. You can always email us to hello@lakelifeweekend.com, and we will answer and gladly receive your input. Yeah, I don't want to keep this much longer. We also have an interview part, and it's with Tom Franklin this week. Just to the fact that we have Maple Syrup Days. We recorded this not too long ago, and it aired already in January. But if you had missed it, now is the time. And to hear his story on maple syrup production, how you can make it a tradition for your own family. So yeah, stay tuned, enjoy this interview, and I hope to be with you again next weekend. Get out and explore. We love Lake Life. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to our interview part. I'm here with Tom Franklin from Verges, and we're going to speak about maple syrup production, a little bit of lake life. But before we dive into producing and tapping maple trees, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Are you from the area?
Yeah.
Have you moved here? Who is Tom? Hi, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Tom Franklin. I just live east of Verges, and I live on a farm, and we've been tapping maple trees for quite a few years. My dad started tapping probably in 2000, but prior to that, my grandma used to tap trees many years ago, probably like in the 40s. And it's kind of heritage. Many people did it growing up around Verges. Farmsteads did it. But we got kind of serious about 2000, and then it has kind of grown. But I'm only a hobbyist. I'm not a what would one notch less than a hobbyist be? And I'm not a professional either, but I am a hobbyist, okay?
Semi-pro.
So, well, I don't know.
Amateur.
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 Yeah, okay.
But before you made the family tradition, I would say, of maple syrup, what's your background? Did you grow up in Lakes Country? Did you move here from Colorado?
Oh, no. We've lived here all our life. Matter of fact, I live on the same farm that my grandfather, Ed, had. He purchased it. The farm that I live on, he actually purchased it in 1945.
Oh, wow.
And he grew up right across the road on Long Lake. And that was a Franklin farmstead. John Franklin homesteaded that in about 1896.
Oh, wow.
So right in that little area, we've been there a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I live in the same farm, and I have a red barn. Many people probably see it when they drive in Lakes Country,
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of cute.
Okay, so you love where you live, obviously.
You know what? I really do. We have Rose Lake behind our house. I swim all the time back there in the summer. I canoe. I like fishing, but canoeing is my passion. We have our cow pasture where I tap maple trees in, and I just like that I live in the country. In Vergus, both myself, my family, my brother, we call it the center of the universe, and we really do. We think, where else would you rather live than Vergus, Minnesota? It is so fun. It really is. I mean, it's a hoot. So it's really cool. Yeah.
So you have a cow pasture. So you are a farmer?
We have a large farm, fairly large farm, but we do not have livestock. I rent it out to 2 local people, and one guy's a dairy farmer and one guy has some beef cows. But I fix the fence, I walk the fence, and they really appreciate it. When they're planting corn in the spring, John Schultz is one of my renters. He'll say, "Tom, did you walk the fence?" "Yep." So then he can bring all his cows over. Jake is his son, and they'll bring them over. They're always busy. Or then in the fall, maybe it'll be they're combining, and he'll say, we're behind, we're combining. Can we come get the cows on this day? And everything's ready. The corral is ready. They'll be bringing hay over. So even though I don't actually own the livestock, we're part of it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's what we do. We have this property, and it was actually kind of interesting. Some of the property we own was from my grandfather, Ed. He owned Franklin Fence Company in Vergus.
Okay.
And now it's a lumber yard, so that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I see. So your family, I know they're still there. So that's part of your...
Yeah, Vergus.
Brothers
Yeah.
and
Vergus.
and
We've been around
cousins.
Vergus a long time.
Yeah, I see. Oh, very interesting. Okay. So now the family tradition of tapping maple trees, I'm curious, how many maple trees do you have? How many do you have to have? Like, can you describe a little bit?
I sure can. Yep. So many people want to tap maple trees. They kind of get an itch, or they might see something that, hey, I think I might try this. It's kind of neat. I might try this. And they're probably hobbyists. They might go to Maplewood State Park. They might see it in a newspaper or something, or read it in a book. But if you're going to tap maple trees, there's a couple key things I was thinking about. One of the key things is you need maple sap. A lot of people will they'll toy around with 1 tree or 2 trees. They might get a little bit of sap. They might even try boiling it down in a microwave. They might try bringing it in the kitchen. They might use a barbecue grill. And that's just somebody kind of playing around. They're not really, they're just toying with it. The next step, I think, would be a hobbyist. That's what I am. A little bit more, some equipment I have. And then the next step would be probably a professional. They're actually trying to make it for a living. They're trying to sell their product. And that gets one level higher. They have higher equipment, and they have probably some hose lines, and they even have a reverse osmosis system, just because they have to do production. But we're going to talk about just how to tap maple trees, what a hobbyist would do. So I'll start, I guess. I would say if you're going to tap maple trees, you'll need at least 100 trees.
100?
Well, the reason you want 100 is you want the sap. You need volume. So if you just want to tap 1 tree, you're not going to get a lot to make maple syrup.
Okay.
You need the volume of liquid. You need the sap. So that's the first thing. To make maple syrup, you need the sap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where some people say, well, if they're the longer I have tapped trees, there is no certain it'll stump you every time. You think, well, when the spring comes, the sap runs. No, that is not the case. I'm telling you, the longer I have tapped trees, it does not work that way. I don't understand it. You think, well, it's 40 degrees, the sap should run. It does not run that way. So, we'll get in that in a minute, but let's talk about just tapping a tree. So I want 100 trees, and what I'm looking for is it's called a sugar bush. And what that is it's a forestry term of a dense population of just maple trees. And we're going to take a step backwards, and we're going to talk about why there's maple trees by Vergas. When you drive through the Lakes country, you'll see beautiful maple trees, and you'll see them kind of by Maplewood State Park, by Vergas. Dent has some. But one of the reasons why there's so many maple trees in this area is it's actually like a topography feature. And the reason I want to point this out is if you get west of Highway 59, prairie fires used to burn through the Dakotas, and they would come all the way across until they hit these lakes. But once they hit the lakes, the prairie fires wouldn't continue, and you'd have a maple basswood forest. So on the east side of most of these lakes, but just in lake country in general, you have maple trees because
they survived. The west side got damaged?
Well, the fires would go out west of like Pelican River. They wouldn't cross. And it was a constant fire. Constant spring fires in the spring would come across the Dakotas. A prairie fire. You probably, if you ever read the... Naturally, yep. If you ever read the book, Little House on the Prairie, they had prairie fires all the time. So the Dakotas would burn quite common, but in Lakes country it didn't. So that's why we have different trees in this area. And the other thing is, there are no maple trees west of Vergas. West of Pelican Rapids for sure. They end here. Maple trees... Well, this is the farthest west and almost the farthest north that a sugar maple lives or grows. That's just some forestry background. Now, they do grow all the way back through the Great Lakes and Vermont and into Canada. They're the largest producers of maple syrup is Quebec, up in that area around the Great Lakes. I guess they have some beautiful large maple trees in the south shore of Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, and I think it's the winters do not get that brittly cold. So that's one of the reasons we are on the very north and west side or topography or whatever edge. We don't have there's not many maple trees west. Yep.
Okay.
So anyway, so if you're going to tap maple trees, you want about 100 of them. You want to look for a sugar bush.
Sugar bush is condensed area?
Just a condensed area. So in
I just know Sugar Bush Lake. I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a Sugar Bush Lake. There might be the name probably came from dense maple trees. Yep, Sugar Bush Township, Becker County.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Interesting.
Dense maple trees. Yep.
Okay.
So then you have to tap a tree, and all you do to tap a tree is you can purchase taps. You drill a hole not further than 1.5 inches in, and you insert a 3/8 inch tap. And all that does is you tap it in with a hammer, and then the sap will drip out. And everybody says, well, all you got to do is drill a hole in there, put a tap in, and it drips. And I'm telling you, it does not drip. It will run, and sometimes it'll run in the afternoon. And as the spring progresses, it will drip out a little bit or run. And then you have to collect it in some type of a container, a pail.
I've seen bags attached.
So there's a couple. The old. If you'll see a photo of a steel tap tapped into a tree, and they use a tapered drill bit, and then they hang a bucket on the tap. And then when it does run, you go pick up the bucket, collect it, and then you take it to your evaporator or your pan, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So now they use bags. You can use pails, whatever you want to collect it, but that's the secret. You have to put a tap in a tree, and you got to get the liquid. But it's a lot of work. So if you have 100 trees, you got to go collect 100 bags. But what you really want is you want the liquid. So I tap 200 trees, and I'm a very small producer, but I'll go out there after work, and I'm really looking for volume. I want 100 gallons. So if it ran a little bit, I got 100 gallons. I'm all excited. Or if my buckets are half full or whatever, I want 200 gallons. I'm excited because it ran today.
100 gallons is a lot of liquid.
Well, now it takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup.
Really?
Right. So you have to boil it down.
40 to 1.
40 to 1, yep. It might not be quite that much. It might be 35, but usually 40 to 1. There's also 4 types of maple trees. There's a sugar, there's a red, then there's the sugar maple, red maple, box elder, and which one am I missing? Sugar, silver, sugar, red, and a box elder. Is that 4?
Yeah, that's 4.
So those are the 4 that you can tap, but we only tap the sugar maple because they have the most sugar content in the tree. The other ones, like a box elder, it's 100 gallons to 1.
Oh, wow.
That's what I'm saying. So it's not even worth it. It's a lot of work. It's not worth it. And if you really want to just try maple syrup, just go buy it. Don't even monkey around with. This is a lot of work.
If the sap like sticky, like if I touch a tree sometimes, like a Tannenbaum or something, then it's like sticky. It's like grease. So maple, is it more liquid? Because if you
it's almost all liquid. I don't think you would feel stickiness by the sap of a maple tree.
Okay.
I don't think you would.
Okay.
And it's kind of goofy. It runs in the spring, like I said. So people will start tapping about March, and it'll be over by May 1st. And some years it doesn't come out of the tree. I don't know if it's weather related, but if you have a good snowstorm, the maple sap will come out of the tree. So if you have a late spring and it's kind of nice, 40, 50 degrees, you have all your taps out, nothing's running, you're kind of frustrated.
We're talking April?
Yeah, April, and all of a sudden you get a big dumping of snow. Right before the snow comes, the maple will pour out of those trees. So it's like a weather event.
Yeah,
a
so
low pressure
maybe the
event.
Pressure, yeah.
But the next time you think, oh good, here comes a snowstorm, it doesn't happen. I don't understand. But during the course of the spring, you will get maybe 3 or 4 runs. So what happens is your bags will fill up or your buckets will fill up. Then you go collect it, and then you have to boil it. And the reason you want to boil it is that's how you boil off the excess water. So here's where a lot of people, they'll say, well, we'll boil it out of a pan, we'll bring it into the kitchen, we'll put it in the microwave. The problem is you're boiling 200 gallons of sap, and you're going to condense it to 5 gallons of syrup. So you need a pan. And the pan,
You need
a large container, a large pan. So you'll have it made. You will go and have it made. And if you're a hobbyist like me, you will have just a flat pan. The sides will probably be 6 or 8 inches high on the sides, and it'll probably be about 2 or 3 feet wide by 3 or 4 feet long. And then you'll put a fire underneath it. And all you're going to do is you're going to
boil it.
You're going to collect the tree sap, and you're going to put it in this pan, and it's going to boil with your fire. And then once, like I said, if you can condense 200 gallons, you'll have 5 gallons of syrup in that pan when you're finished.
When do you know to stop? Or how do you get it? You know what I mean? Like, is it color?
Well, there's
density?
a few things. There's a few things that you'll need, some tools. But one of so there's let's go back to this pan a little bit. Like for a hobbyist like myself, I just have a flat pan, and it's basically just like a large kitchen pan. But if you want to go one notch fancier, they have what's called a flue pan, and what that is there's little dividers in the pan that gives it more surface area to boil quicker. And then they even have a continuous flow system, and these are what the producers will have, and they have what's called reverse osmosis, and basically you can do that in your house. If you have bad water and you want to put a reverse osmosis system in, you'll have the most purest water you can find. Well, they figured out if they run maple sap through a reverse osmosis system, almost 50% of the pure water is taken out. So now you just have 50% less automatically to put in your fancy pan, and you cook it quicker.
Interesting.
But on my pan, it's just a hobbyist pan. It's completely flat on the bottom, and it takes me 1 quart of firewood to equal not 1 gallon. 10 gallons of syrup. So I can boil 10 gallons of syrup per 1 cord of firewood.
What's a cord?
A cord of firewood would be 4 feet wide, 4 feet high, and 8 feet long.
Okay.
And no, it doesn't have to
You
be
got that all figured out, huh?
Well, that and almost everyone uses firewood.
Okay.
So to start maple syruping, if you really want to start maple syruping, you have to get all these things ready. You need to have somebody make a pan for you, and there's a welder just south of Vergas called Backwoods Welding, and he will weld you up a pan. If you call him up, say, I want a maple syrup pan that's about 2.5 feet wide, 3.5 feet long, 6 inches deep, and he makes these. He's a welder. He's not a maple syrup welder, but he specializes in stainless steel welding.
Okay, I was going to ask if
Yep,
what
so it'll
kind
be
of
stainless steel, yep.
Mhm.
And then you will need a bunch of firewood. So you got to get all this stuff ready in the fall.
And you need to put the pan on something. You need
What I do, and this, everyone has their different ways of doing it, but the fire actually has to hit the very bottom of the pan. You can't put the pan on top of a stove because the heat doesn't transfer enough. So the pan has to sit directly on top of the fire. But here's a secret. There can't be any fire going around the pan. The fire can only touch the bottom, not the sides.
So put some bricks, like kind of.
You got to put bricks, and then you also have to level the pan. When I talk about the pan has to be flat, how you level a maple syrup pan is you can use a carpenter's level, but you also pour in sap. So let's just say we're going to level this. I want to pour in 3 gallons of sap, and I want to check to see if this pan is level. I want exactly 1/8 of an inch across the entire bottom of this pan. I don't want any corner dry.
Sure.
And if it is dry, I have to lift the 1/4 corner with maybe a steel shim, because we're going to have a fire underneath this, but I got to figure out how to get this completely level. And this is where a lot of people they make a mistake, because when they're finishing their maple syrup, what will happen is it'll boil down and one side of the pan will go dry and it'll burn it. Because that's what it is. It's sugar. You're burning maple sugar in your pan.
Yeah.
That's why it's so
caramel. You're making
well, but it'll burn it. It's a hot fire underneath there, and it'll turn it black, and it'll wreck it. And it's just all your work has been ruined. So, how my pan holds about 35 gallons. So I shoot for about 200 gallons of sap, and then I'll boil all that down, and that'll give me about 5 gallons of maple syrup in the bottom of the pan. And I told you earlier that I can level my pan on about 3 gallons, so I'll have about, I don't know, maybe it'll be 1/2 inch of liquid across the entire bottom. It will not go dry. So then when it's at that level, I have to slide the entire pan off the fire. And that's the other thing that's very difficult. People have a very, very hard time figuring out how to cook with wood, because it's not like boiling potatoes. When your potatoes boil over on your oven, you just turn the stove down or lift the kettle up. You're cooking with fire. It doesn't work very good. So there's a couple ways to do it. Some people stop prematurely and then they take it into the house and finish it. But what I do is I have a
forklift.
No. I have concrete blocks that the pan sits on, and I have a little metal angle iron, like a railroad system, made for the pan to sit in, and that's what I level. And then I
had to move it off.
I do. I actually, right when it gets done, I actually slide the whole pan off to the side, and I open up the stove door, and I actually will take my shovel and I'll slowly level the coals, because I want to cool it down, and I'm here to check it. So what you'll need a few other tools other than the pan. You will need a hydrometer, and what a hydrometer is it checks the density of maple syrup, and it'll tell you when it becomes sap to maple syrup. And then you will also need, it's called a testing cup, and it's kind of goofy. It's like a little sleeve, and what you do is you slide this in the maple syrup, and remember, there's only 1/2 inch in the bottom of the pan, but by sliding this along, you have a vial full of maple syrup, and now your hydrometer will float in there. So when it gets close to being maple syrup, this is where everyone ruins it. They're almost like hypnotized because they've been watching water boil for 24 hours. It's just boiling, it's just boiling, it's just boiling.
No, that long.
Well, my pan will boil off about 10 gallons an hour, but I don't sit out there constantly. I will go home and I'll come back and fill it up, and I go home. Now, these new evaporators are much more efficient, but I'm just a hobbyist. So mine will boil 10 gallons an hour. So I will boil in 24 hours 240 gallons of sap. That'll give me 5 gallons of maple syrup. So I will test it, and the most critical point of making this maple syrup is not burning it, and don't be complacent. You have to sit there and check. And actually, when you get right down to it, take like a watch and say, every 10 minutes I'm going to check. And then pretty soon, every 5 minutes I'm going to check. And you will see that your hydrometer, there's a line, I don't know if it's 32, but there's a line on there. If you can make that hydrometer hit that line, it's done. Slide.
Oh, you test it towards the end and say, like, okay, now it's...
Exactly. You just constantly keep testing every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes, but do not become complacent. And this is kind of a social event. You'll have several people out there. Your neighbors will come out there. And don't get talking. One person has to stay focused, because you will burn 5 gallons of maple syrup in your pan, and it'll ruin it. So then you slide it off, and now you have completed. I have 5 gallons of pure maple syrup, but it's not filtered. So I let it cool. I take that 5 gallons and I pour it into a food grade container. Now, all my containers, the containers that hang from the trees, the bags that you mentioned, are all food grade. Nothing in this process should be not food grade. So after that maple syrup cools, I pour it into a food grade 5 gallon pail. I can get one from the bakery. It probably comes with baking dough in it. And then I bring that home. I've just completed my first batch of maple syrup.
Cooled off? Or?
Yep, cooled off. And I'm done. I'm done. I want to quit.
Wait. This pan, does it have a
It doesn't. You know,
what is it called? A vent?
Yeah, they call
valve.
it a valve. Some people have valves on it.
Yeah.
I don't. I just have a straight plan.
Lift it then?
I do.
There's a lift tip, or like a little where it floats out?
Nope. Actually, all I do, it's kind of interesting. I just slide it off to the side, and I take a small kettle from my house. I tip the pan up on the edge, and I just ladle it into this 5 gallon pail.
Oh, okay.
And then maybe if someone's there to help me, we pour the rest of it in. And then what you do is you can, now it's sticky, because basically it's maple syrup that has cooled on the outside of the pan, and a lot of times it will be cold out. It'll be snow. So I put the pan back on top of the fire. I put snow or sap back in my pan, and I take a washcloth and I clean out the pan and get it all ready for next time, because now my water is heating, my snow is melting, and pretty soon I have boiling water in the pan. I wash the sides down, I rinse the pan out, and I take the pan back off, and I just lean it up against whatever. So I've just washed my pan, and I'm ready now the next time the sap runs. Does that make sense?
Is it the following year? Or is
no,
there
it'll run in 3 days, or it'll run in 5 days, or it'll run in a week.
So it's a constant flow until the spring is a long
Yep.
harvest season.
Oh yeah, so so if you're sitting around the coffee shop with a bunch of maple syrupers, they'll all talk. Did you get any maple syrup? I didn't get any yesterday. And you'll have phone calls. How much sap did you get? Didn't get any yesterday. Or someone will say, well, we got we average a half a gallon per tree. Oh, good, half a gallon, or a quarter gallon.
That's a lot for one tree.
No, you will get, over the course of the year, you will get several gallons, if it's an averager, several gallons of sap out of a tree. Yep.
It sounds to me like bleeding it out, right?
Oh no, the tree, nope.
Well, I'm not even a hobbyist. I'm like a consumer. I'm like a very uneducated person.
Yeah.
So to me, it sounds like, why are you taking away all the liquid? Like, are we bleeding it out to death ever?
No.
So what is it actually? How much is in there?
So the rule of thumb is you're supposed to tap one tree, about a tree that's about the size of a 5 gallon bucket, or probably about 16 inches around, let's say. One tap per tree. But if it's larger than that,
how long?
It'll only run.
It'll stop?
It'll stop. Yep, it'll stop in about as soon as the temperature gets warm, the bacteria of the tree stops it from leaking out.
Oh. So it clogs itself?
Clogs itself. It's almost like if you had a cut on your finger.
Oh, yeah.
It'll bleed a little bit, and then pretty soon it'll stop bleeding. And that's kind of what's happening to the maple trees. But if it's a large tree, you can put 2 taps in, and it doesn't hurt the tree. Many people have tapped the same trees for 100 years. I'm not kidding you. We've tapped our trees in the same spot since 2000, so it's 18 years, and you will see the hole that you've drilled before. It actually looks like a little scab, but after 1 year, if it's a healthy tree, it'll completely be covered up.
Like a scar, it will be grown.
Just
healed.
Healed, yep. But you can tell, because if you look on some of our trees, you'll see several years, there'll be these little bitty, maybe like a mole or like a wart, little like a woodpecker pecked a hole in this little tree.
Huh.
And it does not trickle out, and if you decide to take your tap out, it'll still leak out. It's almost like it's bleeding, like you described.
Or crying.
No, I wouldn't say crying. But that's what it is. There's sap underneath it, and so then a few
So
more
you have finished this product in your bucket, you went home, so what's the next
Okay, so
step?
what I do is I this is how I do it. I completely get all my maple syrup until it is finished for the year. And it'll only run for a month, and it'll be the end of April. It'll still be quite cool, and I am completely done. So now I take all my pails, and now I want to can it. And this is the other part that a lot of people have a hard time. They struggle with filtering and actually canning the maple syrup. So this is kind of interesting. A lot of people don't listen to how I do this. So you need to filter your maple syrup, and you need to filter it. There's a couple different ways. A producer will filter it through a press. They'll actually compress it, and it'll go through a cartridge. But a hobbyist like myself needs to purchase I think it's called a synthetic filter, and then it's a cone filter, and they stack on top of each other, and you buy them from a maple syrup supplier. But I do see that some of the hardware stores around here are carrying these supplies, these hydrometers, these test cups, and these cone filters. You can reuse them. You just wash them out and you can reuse them. But we used to try filtering it right off the pan, and that's where a lot of people do it. They try, as soon as it comes off the pan, they try to filter it. And I went to a maple syrup clinic a few years ago in Detroit Lakes, and one of the instructors told me just let it sit for about 10 days or 5 days. And he says what happens is the hard particles that are in your maple tree, or it could be a maple leaf or sawdust or whatever is in the pan that you cooked, will settle naturally. Over time, it'll just settle through the syrup to the bottom of the pail. And if you just tip the pail and fill up a stainless steel container, 5-gallon stainless steel container, and you can see when I'm pouring this pail in, I'm pouring the liquid into the stainless steel container, the bottom of the pail will have heavy particles. The top part will be very clear. So stop. I can pour off 80% of the liquid into my stainless steel container. I still have 20% left. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to try to filter the bottom 20, but I'm just going to start with the top 80 to begin with. That's the secret. If you're having a trouble filtering maple syrup, that's the secret. Now I have to reheat this on my kitchen stove at my house.
So we have like 4 gallons. We made 4 gallons out of the 5.
Well, we're going to use the 5 in a minute, but you're going to see why it's important to just naturally let the hard particles settle by themselves. That's the first filtration of natural, and then I'm going to run it through these filters. Okay, so I heat it up on the stove. It starts to boil. The container is so large that I can float my hydrometer in there, and my hydrometer might not be exactly perfect. I might have pulled the pan off just a little bit premature, no problem. Once it gets boiling, I have the identical shaped stainless steel container, and I take a colander, that's a cone-shaped funnel that has a whole bunch of holes in it. You know that? That's a kitchen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I take my cone filters and I stack them in this cone-shaped device.
Mm-hmm.
Then I actually set this in my garage because I don't want to spill anything. But I now the maple syrup is boiling, and I take this 4 gallons and I will pour it through these stack filters. So the first 4 filters are pre-filters, and then the bottom filter is this heavy, thick cone filter that looks like a stocking hat. It looks like it's a wool stocking hat. But if you only do the top 80%, all your maple syrup will go right through there, and it'll land into that stainless steel container. That it's the identical one that you just poured it into, if that makes sense. Now, I got to take this and I got to put it back on the stove, and I got to make sure that my hydrometer hits that red line. And if it hits that red line, it's perfect maple syrup. Then I have all my jars, and you can buy maple syrup jars if you like. The secret is it has to be 180 degrees so it cans it, so the lid it'll cool down. 180. But maple syrup, when it's boiling, it'll be hotter than that. It'll be 200. I use 1 pint clear glass jars just because I buy them uptown, and then I use a large it's a measuring cup.
Mm-hmm.
What was it called? A large measuring cup, a glass measuring cup.
Yeah.
And I actually dip that into this 5-gallon container, and then I take a leather glove, hang onto the glass jar, and I fill every one of my maple syrup jars up. It'll be 4 gallons. Put the lids on, tip them upside down, and then let them cool, and then they'll tip back over, and they'll all go clink, because you're canning maple syrup now. So I've completed 4 gallons of the 5. Now I go back and I do the same process for that last 5 gallons.
1 gallon.
1 gallon. And it will be so difficult to get that to go through those filters, because that is the hard, heavy particles that you're pushing through those filters.
Yeah.
So if you would not let it separate, just, I'm going to boil it all, we're going to stir up all the dirt, leaves, wood chips that might have fallen in there, you will have a very difficult time filtering it. So that's one of the secrets of how to filter maple syrup. And then I also, when I get done, I put a label. I put ours that says Franklin Farm Maple Syrup, Otter Tail County, and I put the year 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will know, it's a finished, clean, clear product. It looks professional. It looks very nice. But then it's completed. I know what it is. I have a product I can give to somebody. You can also put it in a quart jar if you like, glass. And you can buy all these different types of jars. You can buy jars that look like a maple leaf. You can buy jars that look like, you name it. You can put it whatever you want. The difference is it's hard to pour them in a small neck jar. And then a lot of the jars I reuse. I make apple maple jam.
Before we talk about that, which sounds, so how long, if I canned it, how long does it last unopened? And then once I open it, does it go bad? I mean, there's no preservatives in it.
No, it's just boiled down tree sap is what it is. I would say it would last.
You didn't add anything. No, it's an all natural product.
100% natural product. So then it would last for several years. I mean, I don't know when it would go bad, but it would be several years. And actually, if you have had a bad year, so if you get hooked on this, if you're a producer and you get hooked on this, you will have a bad year and you will not make any maple syrup. So you want to keep a little extra in your cupboard, because the next year you might go
a reserve.
You might go bad for a year before you find some maple syrup. So for sure you'd want to keep a little extra. Like last year now, I got 22 gallons, and that was an average year for my 100 I think we tapped about 170 trees.
Well, of product? Or
product.
So 22 gallons of product.
Product, yep.
So we do it times 40.
Yep. Now, the most...
800 gallons that you harvested?
Correct. The most I've ever got is 40 gallons out of those same trees.
1,600 gallons of sap?
See, so it's just a lot of work. But the secret is, if you're going to do this, you want to work. You want the maple syrup. I mean, you want the sap, because without the sap, you don't have anything. So then you can, give this product away. But let's get into some of the things what we can do with it. Once I get this all canned, so I'm done. I've washed up all my stuff. I've washed up all my pans. I've put everything away. All my taps, everything is stored. And I got 20 gallons of maple syrup. I give it away. I give it away for Christmas. Our family uses it. But one of the things that I have did before is I make candy, maple candy. And you take 1 quart, so 2 pints, and you put it into a large saucepan. And you start heating it, and you heat it from 220 to 240 degrees. And here's the secret if you want to do this. I'm warning you. So if you're going to try this at your house, I'm warning you. The secret, a large saucepan and a candy thermometer. And all you're going to do is as you heat it, here's the secret. As it starts to boil, you actually turn the stove down, not up. And you stir it, and you watch the thermometer, and it'll go up from 220 to 225. And you stir it, and it'll start to almost like foam. Turn the stove down a little bit more. Stir it, watch it, it'll go to 230. It starts to foam. That's why you have a large saucepan, because it's foaming. Stir it, turn the stove down. And this is the same thing that you can screw up on your large maple syrup pan. The fire's too hot. It actually foams and it'll burn up your maple syrup. So anyway, when it hits 240 degrees, just stir it and watch it, and by that time you'll actually have turned your stove down quite a bit. I just put it into a non-stick fry pan, pour it out thin, let it cool, and then I cut it with a knife slightly, and it'll break apart like peanut brittle, and it's pure maple sugar in a candy form. And it's tasty. You put it in little Ziploc bags and throw it in the refrigerator. If you want a shot of pure maple sugar, like a candy bar or like a gumdrop or
like caramel.
But it's hard. It's pure sugar.
Okay.
It's fun. I mean, if you get hooked on it, it's like whoa, and it's fun with kids around, or if grandma wants to try it. It's very fun. It's just a neat thing to do. But I'm warning you: do not let it boil over on your stove. Your wife will kill you. Large saucepan. As it boils, turn it down. And then another thing I do in the fall is I have apple maple jam. Apple maple jam. And it takes apples and then actually sugar and then maple sugar, and you cut up the apples and basically
you harvest your own apples?
Yeah, I have an apple tree out back, but this last year the darn thing tipped over. It had so many apples on. The big wind came up and broke it, so I don't know what I'll get next year. I'll get some, but I planted 2 extra apples, or apple trees I did plant. But that is my favorite. Oh my gosh. I mean, I like strawberry jelly. I like raspberry jelly. But this apple maple is wonderful. It's the best. I'm telling you, it is the best.
So how much do you take? How much syrup and how much apple?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's like one. If you look it up online, you'll see it.
Oh, okay.
And then you put some cinnamon in there, you put some nutmeg in there, you put maple syrup in there, and then your apples in there. And there too, it's kind of interesting. You just add all this stuff, and then you stir it, and stir it, and it's condensing. And you're basically boiling out the water that's in the apples. And pretty soon, there's no real way to tell when it's thick enough, but if it's too thick, it will not come out of your jar, a cool jar that you take out of the refrigerator. And if it's too thin, when you put on your toast in the morning, it'll kind of run off your toast.
Yeah.
But if you did it a couple times, you'll figure out just the right amount, because it's hot, it's in a big of this kettle. Then you can it, and I basically can it the same way. I have my maple syrup jars that are empty, because by that time I've ate 10, 15 jars of maple syrup, and then I have put apple maple jelly into these jars. I wash them all out, and I put all this apple maple jam into it, and then I can them. So I have a good supply in the fall of apple maple jam. So
now, hopefully being done with this winter soon, you always mentioned, I think, April. So when is the beginning of, like, when do you prepare the tapping? Like, when do you get out?
You will, right when it starts warming up. So it's probably about March 15th.
Okay.
And you'll walk out there in snow, and you will tap all your trees. It'll be cold. It'll be cold, and then all of a sudden one day it'll hit 35 degrees, and you'll run out there to check to see if it's running. Nope, didn't run. But eventually, it'll start trickling in the afternoon. Usually you tap the tree on the south-facing side of a maple tree, but
because of the sun.
The sun, yep. It's kind of interesting too. If you've ever planted a maple tree in your yard, I think the term a forester uses is bark. It's like cracked bark syndrome. On a sapling maple, the sap will go to the south side of the tree, and then it'll have a hard freeze, and it'll actually break the bark right off of the tree.
Sure.
So there'll be a crack on all the maple trees on the southwest side. So that's what it's called, southwest side crack syndrome.
If they never get tapped. Because
but it's natural. That's where it warms up,
sure.
And there's sugar water underneath that side, and it cracks it, and it breaks the bark on the tree.
So you said you're harvesting for 4 weeks usually?
Let's say, you put the taps out March 15th, so it'd be April 15th, and it can maybe go to the end of April some years, maybe. But in general, I think you're looking for a long, drawn-out spring. You don't want an early spring. Like I said, the longer you tap trees, the more you figure out you don't know anything. But the tree wants to wake up, and it wants to say, hey, it's time to wake up. I'm so sick of winter. I got leaf fever instead of cabin fever. And it wants to start putting sap into the branches. And then when the sap gets up there, it says, hey, it's still winter. And then it wants to run back into the roots. And then it wants to trickle in.
Oh, really?
Well, I don't know if that's what happened.
Yeah.
But that's what it wants to do. It wants to trickle out that little bitty tap you've tapped. And if it goes from winter to summer and there's no spring, the water will not trickle out of that tree.
Okay.
It will not trickle. It's the funniest thing.
So we can really have good harvest years, bad harvest years.
100%. Yep.
But the time is getting ready now, preparing your equipment, and then hit the trees March 15.
Yep.
Harvest through April, and then you cook. So now this merges into, that's why we have maple syrup days in
Vergas.
Is it April 6th, I think?
Probably. It bumps around every year a little bit, but that's about what it is.
And that's already freshly, because there's this contest, it's always that year's harvest, yeah?
I don't think it is. I think you can just submit, because mine, I will submit last year's maple syrup. It'll be 2018. That's what I'm going to submit this year as a contestant. Some years it does not run, and some years it'll be over. I think last year actually, it was not running. It did not run until the month of April.
Okay.
Matter of fact, last year I remember it was so cold in April, so we had maple syrup festival, but it did not run until after the festival.
Yeah.
You can't peg it on a calendar.
Right.
But April is maple syrup season.
So we have this fest coming up pretty soon, and I think in Maplewood State Park they also built like a demonstration.
Oh, beautiful. They have a sugar shack, they have an evaporator, they have bleachers. You can all sit and watch sap boil.
So this is something as an educational, or can you bring your buckets there and actually cook?
They tap it for you. They tap it for you there, and you can watch it all. There's also here in Perm, they have a maple syrup clinic coming up in February, I bet. It says something like how to tap a tree from the tree to the table. And if you're interested in tapping maple trees, you need to get educated on this. There's also some books. One book I would recommend is Maple Syrup Production Manual, and that tells you tons of information. And then a leader it's called Leader Evaporators. That's just a large manufacturer of maple syrup equipment. You don't have to buy it from them, but it shows you what these different products available are, and just different ways of how to do it. A lot of that is way over my head, just because I'm not into production. I'm a hobbyist. And it's quite the social thing. One year, it was Sunday of Easter. We had 50 people come visit me in our little woods. It was just because they ate Easter dinner and they wanted to go out and take a walk in the woods. And there was 50 people that showed up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I never saw them since. I mean, they took off. And especially when it comes time to cleaning everything, you'll never find anybody. They're gone then. So, fair weather maple syrupers. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that was really interesting, and I think we learned a lot. Especially, we need to find the trees.
Yep.
You definitely need trees, property, or something. But closing this, thank you very much. But
Yeah, you're welcome.
we already heard your passion about maple trees, but also swimming, canoeing. What makes it why did you never leave? What is making Lakes Country so special to you in general?
The lakes, the quietness, the loons. I had a friend of mine ask, what was my favorite bird? And they thought for sure it would be the loon. They thought, I bet Tom likes the loons. And I'm a birder. I listen for every bird. I have a large feeder in my front yard right now, and I love loons. I mean, I can listen to loons. I sit on my porch. I have a screen porch. In the hot summer days, I drink a glass of iced tea at night, and I listen to the loons fly over. And I can listen to purple martins. But my favorite bird, I think, is a white-throated sparrow. And you hear them a little bit further north. They do migrate through here, and they will sing. But I think that is my favorite bird. But I'm an outdoor person. I really enjoy the lakes area. I like swimming here. It's just fun. I mean, like when you come to Vergas, everyone is having such a fun time. The cottage people behind my house, they are so friendly. They're just fun. I mean, you're here to enjoy life. You're here to celebrate the weekend. It is a hoot. I mean, even though it's quiet, the cottages are locked up and it's cold, but in the spring, it's fun to see the people return. They are so happy to be back. It's just fun to see the lake area come alive with summer people that just want to come and enjoy our lakes. It's just a blessing. We have one of the nicest areas right here in Vergas, Minnesota. Honest, it's so nice to live in Vergas.
Yeah.
Beautiful, just beautiful. And then a few other things. Vergas, it's kind of interesting. You probably didn't know this, but Vergas is on a hill, and some of water by Vergas trickles into the Ottertail River, and some of water trickles to the Pelican River. And on this ridge, it's a topography feature. Most people don't know this, but there's a ridge that goes from Fergus Falls, and it'll go kind of by Earhart. There's some steep hills, Maplewood State Park, steep hills, right through Vergas, and it kind of wiggles up to Detroit Mountain, and it keeps wiggling, and it ends up kind of near Tamarack Refuge.
It goes north, or it comes from north?
It's a ridge. It's a ridge.
Oh,
it's a topography.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what it's a topography feature. It's a hill, like a mountain range, but it's really. So some of the water will trickle one direction, and some of the water will trickle the other direction. But on this ridge, some places it's very rocky, and it was not farmed like for agriculture. And that's why, right by Vergas, it used to be like, boy, that's some not good plowing land. There's rocks and hills, and that's not good for ag. But what it was is, since it was a topography feature, that's why it's so beautiful. Hills, never farmed, beautiful maple trees. That's why it's so neat.
Yeah.
So if you go west of like 59, most of the fields were plowed.
Yeah.
And if you even come on this side, there's a lot of places that have been plowed because it was tillable. But there's a special ridge that runs right up through Maplewood State Park, right through Vergas, and it continues right up by the Detroit Mountain, and then it continues into the Tamarack Refuge.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, kind of neat, huh?
Yeah, it is. Well, thank you. Sorry. I think I will consult you for some more insider stories from the area in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And then see you at Maple Syrup Fest in Vergas.
Yeah, I hope you're a judge.
I don't know, but I will attend with my son and try your syrup for sure.
Okay.
Thank you for coming out.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, this was already our newest episode of the Lake Life Weekend podcast. We sure hope you enjoyed it. Tune in again next week with another great guest and updates. Always check out our website, lakelifeweekend.com. And if you have some comments, please feel free to email us at hello@lakelifeweekend.com. And you have a wonderful weekend ahead.